The ship named Measured Inquiry drifted silently through the darkness of space. Its hull gleamed under the light of distant stars as it maintained its orbit around the blue-green planet below. Inside the ship, life continued as it had for thousands of years. The crew monitored screens, checked readings, and followed the routines established by their ancestors. Commander Zixtral moved through the curved hallways with practiced ease. His four legs made soft clicking sounds against the metal floor. His skin, the color of pale amethyst, reflected the soft blue lights that lined the walls. He had served on this observation post for 27 years, and he expected to serve 27 more. "Commander," a voice called from a side chamber, "I need you to see something." Zixtral turned to see Kalamox, a junior researcher who had joined the crew only 2 cycles ago. Her eyes, large and completely black, showed signs of stress. The breathing sacs on her neck expanded and contracted rapidly. "What is it, Researcher Mox?" he asked, keeping his voice level. "A reading from Hibernation Sector 7. It's anomalous." Zixtral felt a cold sensation wash over his body. In his species, this was the equivalent of fear. Anomalous readings were never good news, especially not when they came from the planet below. He followed Kalamox into the monitoring chamber. The walls were lined with screens showing different parts of Earth. Cities covered in a thin blue mist. Oceans with sleeping fish. Forests where animals moved about while humans remained still in their homes and beds. Here, Kalamox pointed to a screen showing a residential building in a place humans called Chicago. "The hibernation field is failing in this sector. The concentration is dropping." "How long?" Zixtral asked. "The decay began 6 hours ago." "It's subtle but accelerating." Zixtral leaned closer to the screen. "How many humans in the affected area?" "Approximately 12,000. But there's more." Kalamox looked even more worried now. "We've identified one human who is showing increased brain activity. He may be waking up." This was exactly the scenario that every crew member feared. In the 17,000 years that the Galactic Consortium had existed, in all their exploration of space and discovery of new life forms, nothing had frightened them more than humans. "Show me," Zixtral ordered. The screen changed to show the inside of a small living space. A human male lay on a sleeping platform. He was of average build with short brown hair. According to the data scrolling beside the image, his name was Alan Frank, age 32, occupation medical caregiver. "How long until he reaches full consciousness?" Zixtral asked. "At the current rate, less than 1 hour. We should notify the Central Council." Zixtral considered this. The Central Council would order immediate restoration of the hibernation field, perhaps even a purge of the affected sector. That was protocol. That was safe. He looked again at the sleeping human. For 10,000 years, they had kept humanity in this state. 10,000 years of dreams while the rest of the galaxy evolved, formed alliances, built empires, and occasionally fought wars, all while making sure that humans remained asleep. "Prepare a shuttle," he said finally. "I will go down and observe." "Personally." "Commander," Kalamox's voice rose in alarm. "Protocol forbids direct contact with awakening humans." "I am well aware of protocol, researcher. But we have a unique opportunity here. No one has spoken to an awake human in 10 millennia. Their psychology is known to us only through ancient records and observation of their hibernation patterns." The beer. "Danger will be managed," Zixtral finished firmly. "Prepare a security team and medical staff. I want to be on the surface before he fully wakes." As the shuttle descended toward Earth, Zixtral reviewed what little was known about humans. They were a paradox that had fascinated him throughout his career. Physically weaker than many species, they nonetheless possessed extraordinary endurance. Their planet had shaped them into creatures that could survive almost anything. They could lose limbs and live. They could go days without sleep. They could endure pain that would kill most sentient beings. But most dangerously, they could imagine. They could look at the world not as it was, but as it could be. And they had a disturbing tendency to try to reshape reality to match those imaginings. The first contact between humans and the consortium had gone badly. 3 ships lost. Hundreds of lives ended. Not because humans were evil, but because they were unpredictable. They did not follow logical patterns of behavior. They took risks no sane species would consider. The shuttle landed on the roof of Alan Frank's building. The security team established a perimeter, while medical staff prepared various sedatives that might work on human physiology if needed. Zixtral entered the humans' living space first. The air smelled strange. Humans required an oxygen-rich atmosphere that made most consortium species lightheaded. The room was cluttered with objects that reflected the chaotic nature of human thought. Pictures on walls, books made of actual paper, clothing left on furniture. And there on the bed, Alan Frank was beginning to move. His eyes still closed, he shifted position. His breathing changed rhythm. His fingers twitched. How long? Zixtral asked the medical officer beside him. Minutes only. His brain patterns show he is already partially aware. Zixtral moved closer, fascination overcoming caution. In all his years studying humans, he had never been this close to one that wasn't completely sedated by the hibernation field. Should we restore the field? The medical officer asked. No, Zixtral said. Let him wake, but be ready with the localized field generator if he becomes aggressive. The minutes passed slowly. Alan Frank's movements became more pronounced. His eyes began to move rapidly beneath the lids. And then, suddenly, they opened. Blue eyes. That was Zixtral's first thought. Startlingly blue against pink-tinged white. Those eyes blinked, focused, then widened as they took in the sight of the alien standing in the bedroom. Alan Frank sat up quickly, pressing himself against the wall behind his bed. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Do not be alarmed, Zixtral said, using the human language he had studied extensively. You are safe. The human's expression changed rapidly, moving through fear, confusion, and disbelief. What? Who are you? Alan finally managed to say. I am Commander Zixtral, of the Galactic Consortium. We have been watching over your species for a very long time. Alan Frank looked around the room, then back at the aliens. Am I dreaming? No, Alan Frank. For the first time in 10,000 years, you are truly awake. The human's face showed yet another emotion, something that made Zixtral feel that cold fear again. Curiosity. The one rule had been broken. A human was awake, and nothing would ever be the same again. Alan Frank had been a nurse for 8 years. He had seen car crashes, gunshot wounds, and once, a man who had fallen 20 stories and somehow lived. He had helped deliver babies and watched people take their last breaths. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. The purple alien standing in his bedroom was about 7 feet tall with 4 legs, 2 arms, and a face that looked like someone had combined an insect with an octopus. Its voice came from somewhere in its chest, not its mouth, and it spoke perfect English. 10,000 years? Alan repeated, his brain struggling to make sense of the words. That's not possible. I went to sleep last night. I have a shift at the hospital today. Commander Zixtral made a gesture to the other aliens in the room. They moved back slightly, giving Alan more space. Your perception of time has been affected by the hibernation field, Zixtral explained. To you, it seems like one night has passed, but your species has been in controlled sleep for many generations. Alan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that made the security team tense up. He noticed their reaction and slowly lowered his hands. Why? Why would you do that to us? Zixtral hesitated. In all the planning meetings about what to do if a human ever woke up, no one had prepared a good answer for this question. For safety, he said finally. Both yours and ours. Alan looked around his apartment. Everything was exactly as he remembered leaving it. His scrubs hung over the chair where he'd put them for his morning shift. The coffee cup he'd used last night was still in the sink. I don't feel like I've been asleep for 10,000 years, he said. The field preserves your bodies and minds in a state of suspended animation. You dream, but you do not age beyond a certain point. The technology was developed specifically for your species. Alan stood up slowly. The aliens moved back further, and he noticed that some of them were holding devices that probably weren't friendly. Are you saying you've kept all of humanity asleep? The entire planet? Yes. The simple answer hit Alan like a punch to the gut. Billions of people all sleeping, unaware that their lives were passing by. Generations living and dying in dreams. Show me, he demanded. 20 minutes later, Alan stood on the roof of his apartment building looking out over Chicago. The city looked normal at first glance. Cars in the streets, lights in windows. But when he looked closer, he saw the thin blue mist that hung over everything. And he noticed how still everything was. The cars weren't moving. The lights didn't change. The simulation field creates the illusion of a functioning society, Zixtral explained. Humans who partially wake see a world that matches their expectations, so they slip back into deeper sleep. And this is happening all over the world. Yes, for 10,000 years we have maintained the field, adjusted it as your society changed in its dreams, and kept watch. Alan tried to process this. His whole world, everything he knew, was a shared dream. Why am I awake now, he asked. A malfunction in hibernation sector 7, this area of your city. We were coming to repair it when you woke up fully. And now? What, you put me back to sleep? Zixtral's breathing sacs inflated slightly. That would be the standard protocol. And if I refuse? Alan stepped back, suddenly aware of how vulnerable he was. Please understand. Our species have a complex history. When we first encountered humans, there was conflict, losses on both sides. So you decided to just put us all to sleep instead of working things out? That's not a solution. That's imprisonment. Zixtral had studied human history extensively. He knew that concepts like freedom and self-determination were central to human psychology. No other species in the consortium placed such high value on individual choice. It was never meant to be permanent, he said, though this wasn't entirely true, just until safer methods of interaction could be developed. And did you develop them? In 10,000 years? The alien commander didn't answer, which was answer enough for Alan. I want to see more, Alan said. Take me to your ship. This request went against every protocol in place for human containment, but Zixtral found himself curious about this human. Alan Frank was not reacting with the violence or panic that consortium training had led him to expect. Very well, he agreed. But I must insist on precautions. The shuttle ride to the measured inquiry was tense. Alan sat quietly, looking out the window as Earth fell away beneath them. He saw the blue field covering the planet, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. All those people, he whispered, just sleeping their lives away. They experience full lives, in their dreams, Kalamak said from across the shuttle. The field connects human minds. You share a collective dreamscape where your civilization continues to develop. But it's not real, Alan said, and you took our choice away. On the measured inquiry, Alan was given a quick medical examination, then taken to an observation deck. Through large windows, he could see Earth turning slowly below them. It looked peaceful, beautiful. Why are you showing me all this? Alan asked. If your plan is to put me back to sleep, why let me see your ship? Learn about what you've done. Scientific curiosity, Zixtral admitted. No conscious human has ever been aboard a consortium vessel. Your reactions provide valuable data. Alan laughed, a sound that startled the aliens around him. So I'm a lab rat now? From prisoner to experiment? You misunderstand, Zixtral said. I am risking my position by allowing this interaction. The standard protocol would have been immediate reapplication of the hibernation field. Why didn't you follow protocol then? Zixtral moved closer to the window, his four legs making that soft clicking sound on the floor. In all my studies of your species, I have found you fascinating. Humans are unpredictable, yes, but also adaptable and creative in ways other species are not. I wanted to speak with you, to understand. Alan looked back at Earth. From up here, he could see the thin blue shell of the hibernation field surrounding the entire planet. I need to see the control center, he said suddenly. The place where you monitor the hibernation field, Zixtral hesitated. This went far beyond scientific curiosity. Showing a human the central control systems was expressly forbidden. Please, Alan added. I'm trying to understand what's happened to my world, to accept it. Against his better judgment, Zixtral agreed. As they walked through the corridors of the ship, he noticed how Alan took everything in, his eyes missing, nothing. The human seemed particularly interested in the control panels they passed and the layout of the ship. The central control room was a large chamber with dozens of workstations. Screens covered the walls, showing different parts of Earth. Consortium crew members monitored readings and made subtle adjustments to the hibernation field. This is where we ensure the field remains stable across your planet, Zixtral explained. Alan nodded, his face unreadable. And if someone were to damage this room, what would happen to the field? The question sent a chill through Zixtral's body. The field would begin to degrade. Humans would start to wake up. All of them? Eventually. Yes. Alan looked around. The room once more, then back at Commander Zixtral. His blue eyes had a strange intensity to them. I think it's time for humans to wake up, he said quietly. The next 27 days passed in a blur of activity. Zixtral had decided to keep Alan Frank awake, against the direct orders of the Consortium Council. He told his superiors that the human was providing valuable insight into human psychology. In reality, he was starting to question 10,000 years of Consortium policy. Alan spent his days exploring the ship under guard. He asked endless questions about the technology, the hibernation fields, and the Consortium itself. His mind seemed to absorb information at an alarming rate. Your species created all this? Alan asked, examining a quantum computer terminal in the ship's library section. It's amazing. Not just my species, Zixtral corrected. The Consortium includes over 200 sentient species. We share knowledge and resources, all while keeping humans out of the club. There was no anger. In Alan's voice, just a statement of fact. The decision was made long ago. After the initial conflicts, the Council determined that humans were too unpredictable to join the Consortium. Alan nodded, his fingers moving over the terminal's interface. So instead of trying to understand us, you decided to just put us to sleep. Zixtral felt uncomfortable. Put that way, the policy did seem extreme. It was meant to be temporary, he said again. 10,000 years is a long temporary, Alan replied. In the science lab, Kayla Mox had been studying Alan's brain patterns. She called Zixtral in for an urgent consultation. Something unexpected is happening, she said, showing him a scan of Alan's brain. His neural pathways are changing. Is he ill? Zixtral asked with concern. No. His brain is adapting. The hibernation field does more than just keep humans asleep. It creates a connection between their minds, allowing them to share a collective dream state. But it also seems to have been feeding them information. What kind of information? Consortium, knowledge, technical data, scientific principles, cultural information. It's all been seeping into human dreams for thousands of years. And now that Alan is awake, that knowledge is becoming accessible to his conscious mind. Zixtral looked at the human, who is currently examining a star chart on the other side of the lab. Does he know? I don't think so. Not yet. But he started to demonstrate knowledge he shouldn't have. Yesterday he corrected one of our engineers about quantum field theory. How would a human medical worker know advanced physics? This development worried Zixtral deeply. If one awakened human could access Consortium knowledge, what would happen if more woke up? What if all of them did? On the 28th day, the Consortium Council ordered Zixtral to return Alan to hibernation immediately. They had reviewed his reports and decided the risk was too great. I cannot allow you to stay awake any longer, Zixtral told Alan that evening. The Council has made their decision. Alan sat in his quarters, looking calm. Too calm. I understand, he said. When will it happen? Tomorrow. We will return you to your home and the field will be restored to full strength. One last request then, Alan said. Let me see the stars once more. From the observation deck. Zixtral agreed. It seemed a small kindness. On the observation deck, they stood side by side looking out at the vastness of space. Earth turned slowly, below them, still wrapped in its blue cocoon. Your people never stood a chance, did they? Alan asked quietly. The moment you decided to put us to sleep instead of talking to us, you sealed your fate. What do you mean? Zixtral felt that cold. Fear again. I've spent the last 27 days learning your systems, understanding your technology. At first, I didn't know how I was doing it. Things just made sense to me, like I'd known them all along. Then I realized the hibernation field didn't just keep us asleep. It was teaching us. Zixtral stepped back. Kalamox was right. Yes. For 10,000 years, humans have been absorbing your knowledge through our dreams. We just didn't know it until now. Alan turned to face the commander. I've already sabotaged the hibernation field controls. It started failing 15 minutes ago. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Crew members rushed past in the corridor outside. What have you done? Zixtral asked, though he already knew. I've woken up humanity, Alan said simply. Across Earth, the blue mist began to thin. In Chicago, a woman named Lisa Powell opened her eyes in her apartment and knew immediately that something had changed. She sat up in bed, her mind filled with strange knowledge of quantum engineering that she had never studied. In Mexico City, Joe Rivera woke up remembering dreams of starships and alien worlds. He got out of bed and began drawing technical schematics for faster-than-light drives on his kitchen table. In Beijing, in Moscow, in Lagos, and Sydney, humans were waking up. And they were remembering their dreams. Zixtral rushed to the control center with Alan following calmly behind him. The room was in chaos. Screens showed the hibernation field failing across the planet. Crew members worked frantically to restore it, but systems kept shutting down. How did you access the main controls? Zixtral demanded. You were never left alone in here. I didn't need to be, Alan explained. I figured out how to access the system remotely 3 days ago. Your security protocols are good, but they weren't designed to keep out someone who already understands how they work. Kalamox approached them, her face showing clear distress. Commander, we're receiving reports from the surface. Humans are waking up everywhere and they're building things. What things? Zixtral asked. Technology. Consortium technology. They're constructing communication devices, power systems, even propulsion components. It's like they already know how everything works. Because we do, Alan said. Every night for 10,000 years, your hibernation field has been teaching us. We've been learning while we slept. Zixtral watched the screens as more and more humans woke up across the planet. In some cities, they were already gathering in large groups, organizing themselves with surprising efficiency. We need to notify the council, Kalamox said. Request immediate containment measures. It's too late for containment, Alan told her. Look at how fast we're moving. It was true. In the major cities, humans were already converting existing infrastructure into new forms. Power plants were being modified. Communication networks were changing. And in some places, construction had begun on what looked like launch facilities. How is this possible? Zixtral wondered aloud. Even with the knowledge, the speed of coordination is impossible. The hibernation field didn't just feed us information, Alan explained. It connected us. For thousands of years, humans have been sharing a collective dreamscape. We learned to communicate in ways you can't imagine. Now that we're awake, those connections remain. On the screens, the first human ships were taking shape. Not crude vessels, but advanced craft incorporating consortium technology. Humanity wasn't starting from scratch. They were beginning with the collected knowledge of 200 species and 10,000 years of advancement. What do you want? Zixtral asked finally. Justice, Alan replied. Freedom. A place in the galaxy you denied us. He looked back at the screen showing his awakening world. And we're going to take it. 6 months after what humans called the Great Awakening, Earth had changed beyond recognition. The old cities still stood, but alongside them rose new structures built with technology far beyond what humanity had possessed before the hibernation. Launch centers had replaced sports stadiums. Power plants now ran on fusion rather than fossil fuels. Communication systems operated through quantum entanglement instead of radio waves. Lisa Powell stood in what had once been her small Nebraska farm. Now it housed a research facility where she led a team developing new propulsion systems. Her hands moved confidently over the holographic display, adjusting equations that would have been incomprehensible to her 7 months ago. "The calculations look good," said her assistant. "We could begin production next week." Lisa nodded. Like many humans, she had awakened with knowledge she had never consciously learned. In her case, quantum engineering principles had simply been there in her mind, as familiar as her own name. "Send the designs to the manufacturing hub in Denver," she said. "I want these engines installed in the new fleet as soon as possible." The first human ships had launched just 3 months after the awakening. They were small vessels, built from repurposed materials and powered by engines based on consortium designs. Now the second generation of ships was nearly ready. Larger, faster, and armed with defensive systems that matched anything the consortium could deploy. Alan Frank, once a nurse in Chicago, now held the rank of admiral in Earth's hastily formed defense force. He stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching as Earth grew smaller behind them. His vessel, along with 30 others, was on its way to the nearest consortium outpost. "How long until we reach the station?" he asked his navigation officer. 2 hours at current speed, Admiral." Alan nodded. The consortium had responded to humanity's sudden awakening exactly as he had expected. First came attempts at negotiation, with Zixtral serving as the primary envoy. When those failed, the Council had ordered a blockade of Earth. Then, as humans continued to advance at an alarming rate, they had moved to more direct action. 3 consortium battleships had entered Earth's atmosphere 2 weeks ago. They had targeted the largest launch facilities, intending to halt human expansion before it truly began. The attack had failed. Human defense systems, built using knowledge gained during the long sleep, had destroyed 2 of the ships and forced the third to retreat. Now humanity was taking the fight to the consortium. In the central meeting chamber of the Consortium Council, panic was spreading. Representatives from 200 species argued loudly about how to contain the human threat. "They've already taken control of 3 mining outposts in the Orion sector," said the representative from the methane-breathing Volari. "Our supply chains are disrupted. My species lost 2 colony worlds last month," added the representative of the Jaxiri, a race of silicon-based lifeforms. The humans offered the colonists alliance or evacuation. Most chose alliance. "This is precisely why humans were contained in the first place," shouted another counselor. "They are unpredictable, aggressive, and dangerous." Zixtral sat quietly at his place. He no longer commanded the measured inquiry. After the failure of the hibernation field, he had been recalled to face punishment for his role in allowing a human to learn about consortium systems. Instead, he had been assigned to the diplomatic corps, tasked with finding a way to communicate with the suddenly awakened and rapidly advancing humans. "The containment policy has failed," he said, his voice cutting through the arguments. "We must find another approach." "What do you suggest, Commander?" asked the High Counselor, an ancient being from one of the founding species of the consortium. "Surrender?" "Adaptation," Zixtral replied. "Humans are not just advancing technologically, they're forming alliances with many of our member species. The Tellurians have joined them completely. The Vex are trading with them. Even some Volari colonies have declared independence to side with humanity." "Traitors," hissed the Volari representative. "No," said Zixtral. "They see opportunity where you see only threat. The human approach to governance is different from our hierarchical structure. They offer their allies true autonomy." The High Counselor leaned forward. "Are you advocating for the human cause, Commander?" "I am stating facts. Our empire is beginning to crumble, not just because of human military action, but because our own members are choosing to leave." On Earth, Karen Miller, a former history teacher, had emerged as a key figure in humanity's new leadership. Unlike Alan, who focused on defense. Karen led the diplomatic efforts to build alliances with other species. She sat across from a delegation of Tellurians, insect-like beings, who had been among the first to approach Earth after the awakening. "Our worlds are rich in resources that would benefit your shipbuilding program," said the lead Tellurian. "In exchange, we seek protection from consortium reprisals." Karen nodded. "We can offer more than protection, full partnership, equal voice, in all decisions that affect both our peoples." The Tellurians' antennae twitched in surprise. In the consortium, their species had held low status, their opinions rarely considered by the ruling council. "Equal voice, even though your technology now exceeds ours?" "Especially because of that," Karen said. "We've learned from the consortium's mistakes. They saw difference as danger. We see it as strength. Across the galaxy, more species were making the same choice. The carefully maintained balance of the consortium, built on strict hierarchies and the control of knowledge, was falling apart in the face of humanity's different approach." Back on the human flagship, Alan received a message from Earth. New sensor readings showed a large consortium fleet gathering near Jupiter, at least 50 ships, including some of their most powerful warships. "They're getting desperate," said his communications officer. Alan nodded grimly. "Desperate enemies are dangerous ones. Signal the fleet to change course. We're heading back, to defend Earth." The human ships turned, accelerating to speeds that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. The knowledge absorbed during 10 millennia of hibernation had given humanity advantages the consortium never anticipated. On the consortium command ship, the admiral in charge of the fleet watched the approaching human vessels with growing concern. They were outnumbered, but the recent battles had shown that human tactics were unpredictable and often effective against superior forces. "Should we engage when they arrive?" asked his second-in-command. The admiral hesitated. The council had ordered them to prevent human expansion by any means necessary, but many of the crew had expressed doubts about attacking a species that had already demonstrated both advanced technology and unusual restraint in their counterattacks. "We will hold position and attempt communication first," the admiral decided. "Fire only if fired upon." As the human fleet approached, tension grew on both sides. The future of two civilizations hung in the balance. Would this be the beginning of a war that could tear the galaxy apart? Or could a new understanding emerge from the ruins of the old order? Alan Frank stood on his bridge, looking at the consortium fleet on the view screen. 10,000 years of sleep followed by 6 months of frantic awakening had led to this moment. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let's see if they're ready to talk." 5 years had passed since the day Alan Frank first opened his eyes aboard the measured inquiry. 5 years of rapid change that had transformed not only Earth but the entire galaxy. The once mighty consortium now existed only as a shadow of its former self. More than half of its member species had left to join what humans called the Terran Coalition. Alan stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital platform, looking down at the blue planet below. It was hard to believe how much had changed. Cities glowed with new energy sources. The atmosphere was cleaner than it had been in centuries, purified by technology adapted from consortium designs, and in orbit hundreds of ships came and went, carrying humans and their new allies to worlds throughout the galaxy. "Quite a view, isn't it?" said a familiar voice behind him. Alan turned to see Zix Tral approaching. The former consortium commander now served as the Valari representative to the coalition. Many of his people had chosen to ally with humanity after the Battle of Jupiter 5 years ago. "I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out," Alan said, "if the hibernation field hadn't failed that day. Or if I had followed protocol and put you back to sleep immediately," Zixtral added. They stood in silence, for a moment, looking at the stars. The battle near Jupiter had never happened. At the last moment, 3 consortium ships had broken formation and signaled their surrender to the human fleet. Others had followed, and soon the mighty armada had fractured, with many captains refusing to fire on the humans. In the years that followed, the consortium's careful balance of power had collapsed entirely. Species that had been kept in check By strict hierarchies and controlled access to technology found new freedom in alliance with humanity. The Terran Coalition, built on principles of cooperation rather than control, had grown rapidly. "Karen is waiting for us in the council chamber," Alan said finally. "The Jaxiri delegation has arrived." Zixtral nodded, and they walked together through the gleaming corridors of the station. Crew members of various species moved about their duties. Humans worked alongside Volari, Tellurians, and dozens of other former consortium members. The diversity that the consortium had feared was now the coalition's greatest strength. In the main council chamber, Karen Miller was already seated at the large round table. Now serving as president of the coalition, she had guided the new alliance through its difficult early days. Her background as a history teacher had given her insight into how societies rise and fall, knowledge she had used to build something more stable than the consortium's empire. "The Jaxiri have agreed to join us," she announced as Alan and Zixtral entered. Their remaining colonies voted unanimously. This was significant news. The Silicon-based Jaxiri had been founding members of the consortium, and until now had remained loyal to the old order. "That leaves only 23 species still aligned with the consortium," Zixtral noted. "My sources say the High Council is considering dissolution." "After 17,000 years," Karen said softly. "It's hard to believe." "They couldn't adapt," Alan said, taking his seat at the table. "That was always their weakness." Lisa Powell entered the chamber next, her arms full of data tablets. As head of the Coalition's research division, she coordinated scientific efforts across dozens of worlds. The knowledge humanity had absorbed during hibernation had given them a starting advantage, but it was Lisa's leadership that had pushed development further. "The new propulsion system is ready for full production," she announced. "It's 30% more efficient than our current drives." "Good," said Karen. "That will help with the deep space exploration program." Joe Rivera arrived last. Once an ordinary man who had awakened with extraordinary knowledge, he now led the Coalition's engineering corps. His designs had transformed Earth's infrastructure and were being implemented on allied worlds across the galaxy. "The atmospheric processors on New Teller are online," he reported. "The colonists can start surface construction next month." The meeting continued, with reports from various departments and discussion of ongoing projects. It was a scene that would have been unimaginable 5 years ago. Humans and aliens working together as equals, sharing knowledge and resources freely. After the meeting, Alan found himself alone again on the observation deck. Looking out at the stars, he thought about the journey that had brought humanity to this point. "You seem troubled, Admiral," said Karen, joining him by the window. "Not troubled," Alan replied. "Just thoughtful. We've come so far so quickly. Sometimes I wonder if we're moving too fast." Karen smiled. "That's why the consortium feared us, you know. Not just our unpredictability, but our speed. We adapt and change in years what takes other species centuries, and that scares them." "Change always scares those who benefit from things staying the same," Karen said. "The consortium maintained power by controlling knowledge, keeping species separated, managing who knew what. We took a different approach." It was true. The Coalition's founding principle had been open access to information and technology for all member species. No hierarchies based on biology or history. No restrictions on development. It had created a messy, sometimes chaotic alliance, but one that was growing stronger every day. Zixtral joined them, his 4 legs making that familiar clicking sound on the floor. "The last consortium holdouts in the Orion sector have requested talks," he informed them. "I believe they will join us soon." Alan nodded. "Not through conquest, but by choice. That's important. It is what makes your approach different," Zixtral agreed. "The consortium controlled through force and fear. You offer freedom and cooperation." "We learned from your mistakes," Karen said gently. "And we are learning from your successes," Zixtral replied. "My people never imagined a system without strict hierarchies could function. Yet here we are." The 3 stood in silence, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. The blue planet, once wrapped in the mist of hibernation, now stood at the center, of a new galactic order. What happens when we run out of consortium knowledge? Alan asked suddenly. All those dreams that taught us during hibernation, they were just the starting point. What happens when we need to create something truly new? Karen smiled. That's what humans do best, Alan. We imagine things that don't exist yet and then we make them real. That's why they feared us. That's why they kept us asleep. And that's why we'll go further than the consortium ever did, Zixtral added. Because you dream while awake. As night fell over Earth, lights glowed in cities around the globe. In laboratories and workshops, humans worked alongside their alien allies, building technologies that had never existed before. In universities and schools, children learned history that included both Earth and the wider galaxy. And in orbit, ships prepared to venture out to stars the consortium had never dared to explore. The only rule had been never to wake the humans. Now that rule, like the empire that created it, existed only in memory. And from its ruins, something new and better was emerging. A future built not on fear of differences but on the strength that came from embracing them.